Yeah, Subways and Allsups. It's like there's 2 in every little small town, and that's never really made a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah. Gas burritos and sandwiches.
Where are we technically now, though? Is this technically Newcastle?
Yes. Yeah, the ranch is in Winnebago, warehouse is in Newcastle.
Yeah. So, but family's always been here?
No. I grew up in a town called Memphis.
Okay.
And, my sister moved here. And I was working for her husband years ago. And been here just 8 years now.
Oh, you haven't been here that long?
No. Yeah, I spent time all over Texas. It's always been in Texas. Most of my life in Memphis. Then better part of a decade in College Station.
Yeah, you went to school there?
Well, I just like to live in college towns. So, but I lived in multiple places within 30 miles of College Station. So ran a ranch outside of there. That was the last place before I came here.
And that was about 8 years ago?
Yep.
But you were working for your brother-in-law here, though, when you moved out here?
Yes, sir.
Was he just ranching, or what was he?
Doctor in yearlings. He was running yearlings. So there's a lot of wheat pasture around here. And so, yeah, he's got cows, and he's got a grain elevator where he'll buy, sell, trade wheat seed. And with all those connections with those wheat farmers, the ones that aren't harvesting it, we'd run yearlings on them. We were running about 2,000 head, which is kind of a smaller operation for some of the guys around here. But, it was just me and him looking after him. And I did that for a year. That's what got me here. And then I decided to go full-time rodeo time. And I was rodeoing a lot at the time, and that didn't slow down. But just went from rodeoing and day working to rodeoing and rodeo time. Dale Brisby. rodeotime.com. Yeah.
It started with just making videos, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just simple videos.
Yeah.
You just do it for fun.
That was 10 years ago. 2013, July 1st, 2013 was the first video.
That was before you moved out here.
Right. Yeah. So, that was a couple years before I moved out here. Yeah.
Were you all together down in College Station?
Yep. And then I moved up here. 6 months later, he moved here.
And you both were riding broncs.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. And bulls.
See, I guess yeah. So, but you did actually ride bulls?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And bareback.
Okay.
And
I didn't even know you rode bareback too.
Yep.
Oh yeah, you did everything.
And fight bulls.
Okay.
I got my PRCA card fighting bulls too.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Mm-hmm.
So were you doing all of it simultaneously?
Sometimes.
Or just on and off?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't ride all three and fight bulls.
Sure.
Sometimes.
Well, I don't know.
Sometimes I might fight bulls and ride broncs.
Sure. It wouldn't surprise me if you were riding it and
if
fighting
anybody
it.
could do it, I could do it.
That's a fact.
If anybody could, I could. Yeah, I grew up on the rough stock end of the arena.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't I've picked up at a rodeo, but not like I haven't been hired as a pickup man. I guess unless you count when my dad hired me, when I was in high school, and I picked up Archer City one year, but and then I got to pick up the same rodeo he passed at. I picked up that rodeo a year later, same perf, same day he died, 1 year after, on the same horse he died on. That was pretty cool.
Whoa.
But anyways, I didn't mean to go there. What I was going with that is everything you could do on the rough stock end of the arena, I've always just been super passionate about.
Yeah.
And so I've done all those things in the rodeo arena with the exception of picking up. So bullfighting, bareback, saddle bronc, bull riding.
What was man, I wasn't raised around rodeo or horses or anything. I kind of had to learn it on my own. But my brother-in-law was a horseshoer. So at the end of high school, I started working for him, and that's how I got introduced to all of it. But I grew up in Decatur, so I was around a bunch of people that obviously rodeoed at a high level.
A lot of Tommies around there.
Yeah, for sure. But you probably know, it's an industry that can be a bit difficult to break into. There's, it can be a bit guarded at times. And so it was always curious to me, you're somebody that was raised with it, and you were in it neck deep. But it seems like you make a pretty conscientious effort to include people that maybe weren't raised around it or don't know anything about it, but you seem pretty cool to help those types of people. Like, where did you get that from? Because I don't think it's typical in the industry.
So I grew up, my dad was always teaching saddle bronc at Sankey rodeo schools. Lyle Sankey, he went to the NFR in all 3 rough stock events. He's in the Hall of Fame. He's only one of 4 people that went in all 3. It was Lyle, Ty Murray, Jim Shoulders, Larry Mahan. And so he's one of 4 that has done that. Anyway, he puts on 20, 30 schools a year all over the country. SankeyRodeo.com for those of you that want to go. But my dad, growing up, like since before I was born, he was teaching the bronc riding at those. So I would bebop around those. My dad was always helping young people. And then in college, I always seemed to be the guy who had access to, I was always practicing. Like I had to be getting on something. And so, I don't know. I just seemed to constantly have people come to me that wanted to get on their first bull, or like I call it like a bucket list bull ride, or, just see what it was like. Firemen, like these Canadians, football players at A&M, multiple football players, baseball players, like just drunks, like anybody.
Yeah.
Girls wanted to get on a steer, like anything. Sure. I was always helping people get on their first one. And not that I was qualified, but, at the time, like they didn't have any other options. So have you ever been to Chili Fest?
I haven't.
It's in Snook. It's right outside of College Station.
Right.
Guy that owns that arena and owns that property is named Kermit Moss, an NFR team roper. I think he won the average in 95. And there was his right-hand man at the time was Garrison Gable. Fast forward in life, I would be his best man at his wedding. But Garrison and I became good friends, and we helped Kermit put on a summer series, the Snook series, and I was in charge of the rough stock. Garrison was in charge of the timed event. And so yeah, I just always was around a practice pen. That setting was a place in College Station where we were always going out. And then everything about my life was fashioned around doing this for the rest of my life. So like there was not a world where I needed a pen. Like I would save up money for panels, save up money for bucking shoots, for bucking horses. Where are we going to keep them? Like those were the logistics I tried to figure out all the time, every time. Like it was never any other plan. It was always rodeo, no matter what. Like I sold vitamins in college so that I could rodeo. I sold firewood, horses, anything so that I could rodeo. And, with that pen, when you buck rough stock, it's just always better to have people around. And when you buck a bucking horse, you got to have at least 5. If you're bucking a bull, you and one other person can do it. Guys have gotten hurt doing it by themselves, actually. Like there's, guys get creative. But with horses, you need about half a dozen. And so it's always good to have as many people around as you can get. It's more fun that way. So when rodeo time fired up, about the time I decided I needed some help around the ranch, this kid reached out and said he needed an internship. And that was about 5 years ago. And in a way, I'd already had interns. Guys come work on the ranch for free and learn. But this now became official, and it was something that was shared, and they were called interns. And Deanie Weenie String Bikini was his name.
Where's Deanie Weenie at?
He works for various people in the industry. Look, last I heard, he was working for Cinch. So he kind of stayed in the industry.
Oh, cool. Was he already in it?
No.
Okay.
No. And that's the cool thing about an internship. You do get to learn while you're there, whatever craft you want to learn, but you also get to meet a lot of people, and you get to meet, various people in the industry. Mm-hmm. Any internship is, hopefully that's something that comes with the territory, that you get to meet people.
This is very particular though, in the sense that if you're not,
we're a niche within a niche.
Yeah.
Rodeo within the Western industry.
Definitely.
So we get very specific, which is good because I think that's helpful. Sometimes you can get too broad. You can get too wide open.
Definitely.
So, but when you've got this specific of a niche, it kind of makes it easier to corner the market, I guess.
Yeah, it was fascinating that you had the success that you did, because it seemed so obvious. Like once you had a lot of the success, it's like, wow, this is totally a market that's totally unserved. but yet nobody had done it. And you're still kind of one of the only people that is doing it and doing it the way that you are. It's very unique.
Yes, sir. It couldn't be more like if, let's say I'm providing something the market needs, like if it needed something just 0.01% different, I don't know that I could do it as well. Like this is like, meaning like this is my passion. This is what got, like I was the class clown. I was passionate about rodeo. My old man was also an ag teacher at one time, so he put me in everything FFA, all these speaking events. So like those three things came together. Like I wasn't embarrassed to talk in front of a camera. I was at least trying to make people laugh. And there's no one human that I've ever met or known that was more passionate about rodeo than my dad. And so I got some of that from him and ranching.
Was he a producer or?
We did that a little bit, but he did it all. Like he told me when I was a kid, he looked back and thought that he had been a jack of all trades, a master of none, but he could do everything. He could catch that right horn, left horn on when he was heading. He was a PRCA judge. He would judge some PRCA rodeos. He had rode bareback horses. In Amarillo by Morning, the video, there's two bareback riders. One of them gets hung up. The other one's got a brown vest on, and that's my dad.
Wow.
He rode broncs the longest. He's got he's got old pictures of him riding bulls. He picked up the most, and he died in a rodeo arena. It was just like such a blessing. Yeah, he had a heart attack picking up in Helotes.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
How old were you?
I mean, like it was 10 years ago. Like I usually always went to Helotes with him, but I had got a gig fighting bulls for Sammy Andrews, and I was in Paris, Texas that night, fighting bulls. And, Jacobs Crawley called me, and I just happened to have my phone I was tying in a bareback horse. And anyways.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was super passionate about it, and it just carried over to me, and it's kind of, most of the time it's a blessing, sometimes it's a curse. But he died with $800 in his account. Like he was also a cowboy. He was also a cowboy. He worked at the Pitchfork whenever I was born. That's where we were. It neighbors the 4.6s. And that's where I always wanted to go, was the Pitchfork. I was either going to be a rodeo cowboy, work on the Pitchfork, or go to the military. And I just never got off of the rodeo cowboy part.
So right now, you probably could have never imagined that it would turn into what it has. And I wouldn't think that you had a vision that it would be like this. Like those three things that you listed off. I mean, you kind of do those now, but just in a very, very different way than I would think you could have ever imagined. When you were first making your videos, did you ever have like a real plan of like where this could go or where it was headed? Could you foresee the technology of the internet?
Well, I had already been being a goofball and, prank calling and having a good time and doing that prior to the first video. And so we turned on the camera and it was just fun. And that's what we did. And then, following that, it took about we didn't even start making money on YouTube till like 4 years after. We were using copyrighted music, and I think the apparel and the YouTube revenue showed up about the same time.
Okay.
And the apparel first, actually. But anyways, whatever. I began to see, like, fast forward to rewind to what I said earlier about like being a salesman, like selling vitamin. Like I loved sales, still do. Like I love sales like that. As far as how to make money, like I'd rather sell than be in service. And so that fell into my wheelhouse with Rodeo Time, and being the brand that Dale Brisby, helped grow and push. And I began to see a formula of providing value with videos, value in the form of comedy and entertainment. That's number one. The day I stopped doing that is the day I begin to lose. And it's the day I deserve to lose. Like I've got to bring value to people.
Sure.
And the more value I bring, then the more value I bring, the more permission I get to ask for a potential purchase. And as I bring that value, I'm branding.
Mm-hmm.
So Rodeo Time apparel, and then a few sponsors.
So is there a pretty conscientious effort to make things usually humor-based?
Yeah, because that's my wheelhouse.
Okay.
Occasionally I'll do something serious.
Yeah.
You know, like I made, for instance, one of my last posts was this elk that I just harvested. You know, like most of that, I think maybe the first line or two was funny, but most of that was serious, you know, like,
Sure.
and it's obviously something like, you know, that wasn't no skit we were out there doing and I accidentally got an elk. You know, that was like very intentional, serious thing. And so like you do see that side of it. But yeah, even probably the post I'm going to put up today, like we're riding a bull, but then I'm also cracking a bullwhip and making jokes and like,
Sure.
you know, it's just in here usually with business, I'm serious more often than not. And when we video, it's when I get to be me and let loose and do what I want to do and be funny. But that's our wheelhouse. And, you know, a lot of people for some reason just assume this is a flash in the pan for us. But the thing that drives this boat is what I enjoy the most.
Okay.
You know, it'd be like if you were most passionate about recording music and playing on stage, which I'm sure it is, if that's the thing you're most passionate about, well, then it gives you a little bit of job security because that's what you got to do and be good at. If you were most passionate about getting to eat in cool restaurants on the road and partying after,
Sure.
and those other things weren't your top passion, then you've probably got a clock ticking, or at least a shorter one than otherwise. And so that's one thing for us. Like we love when we turn the camera on, like we enjoy it. And don't get me wrong, there's some days it's 110 degrees and it's work. It is work.
Sure.
But you know, it's okay to love your work. And 9 times out of 10, we can't wait to film tomorrow. Like, I don't know if you...
What are y'all doing tomorrow?
We're going to rope a bull out of a pickup.
Perfect.
Like they do in Australia. Perfect. We're going to try it.
Yeah. Do they like tie off or what do they do?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure some people have dallied. It's just a little more dangerous.
Yeah, for sure.
But we'll probably tie off somewhere on the pickup. Yeah. Hopefully the bull will rip it apart.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, and so the video will be like, we tried to do this, and it's like, man, we're curious how it's going to go, you know? So I can't imagine like the thumbnail entitled, the audience should be the same. So,
yeah,
but that's fun to me.
Totally.
That's super, like, that's interesting. You know what I'm saying? Like if you had an extra 2 hours and I told you that's what we were doing, you'd be like, hey, can I go?
Absolutely.
Can I go check that? Yeah. And so long as we do that, it boils down to, so long as you're interesting, they'll be interested. And then that's it. And the other part is like 20 years ago, you needed a middleman, a production company, an agent, a manager, something. But in here, it's that camera and the internet. So long as they don't cut the internet off, on the other side of the internet is the audience.
Yep.
And if I'm good enough, then they'll approve me.
Yep.
And that's what's been interesting over the years is like seeing these gray hairs in the industry that are like, kind of like, I don't know about this. Well, the mob does.
Sure.
So.
Sure. Yeah,
I don't care what you think.
Most like hate it. You can go straight to the people that
exactly. Like I don't know about well, your customer does, you know. And like I'm not trying to be sassy. I'm specifically thinking of 2 or 3 people over the last decade that have just like one person said Dale Brisby was the worst thing to happen to pro rodeo, and I'm just like I don't know.
Interesting.
The worst
is it because
surely there's something else
because you're not serious enough?
PETA. Have we? I mean, are they not the worst? Maybe I'm above them.
Maybe.
You know? I'm not saying I'm the best, but surely I'm not the worst.
Sure.
There's no resentment there.
No, not at all.
I don't want to say any names, but his name is. No, I'm just
please. Oh, I'm so ready for it.
I'm just kidding.
I'm so ready.
Maybe one day.
We'll get it out. Well, we'll be doing. We do this for 4 hours, so I'll get it.
Good.
At
yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
So, are these the type of people that you're talking about when you say like flash in the pan? They say that you're.
Yeah, there was another guy who's actually a friend of mine. He was like, "Oh, there's just a flash in the pan. That's just not going to work out." And my lawyer, he's my college roommate, and he was the one told me that this one particular guy, that mutual friend of ours, said that. And I don't like for that kind of stuff to fuel me. Like I'd rather kind of like just my passion for making people laugh be a fuel. Like I try not to let haters fuel me.
Sure.
But it is funny. Like, you know, that guy said that and it's like, dang, and then we celebrate 10 years, which is what we in the biz call a decade. And I'm like, well, a decade is more than a flash in the pan, you know?
Absolutely.
So
You find it difficult to, obviously your brand is so attached to you and you as like a character. Do you find that difficult? If you could go back, would you have made that attachment so strong? Would you have tried to do something a little bit different?
So if you get into the conversation of like an exit, if I were looking for an exit and I wanted somebody to buy Rodeo time,
Sure.
you know, then maybe, but like that's never been my plan, and it's not my plan now. I mean, if somebody came up to me and was like, tried to make me an offer on Rodeo time as a brand, and, you know, I think, could it stand on its own? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Would there need to be some 5-year plan for Dale Brisby to stay involved? Great. You know, like, but that's not my plan. I've never really thought of that. Nobody's ever approached me because maybe for that reason that they think Dale Brisby needs to stay a part of it. But essentially what this is for me is, I mean, it's my passion, but it's also like, it's my life. I get to live this every day. And so I think God had a plan. The way he orchestrated my upbringing, the way he orchestrated my education, my friends, me being passionate about rodeo rather than polo. You know, I think that God just had a plan. One thing in rodeo that I'd always struggled with was like, if I made a good ride, how do I accurately give God glory for that? In the conversation of, for instance, maybe an atheist or just a non-believer, like, how do I give glory to God in that, with that person in conversation, if they just saw me make the good ride?
Okay.
And I struggled with that. Like, how do I communicate it? How do I say it? Well, and because they could argue, yeah, but you just did that.
Sure.
You worked real hard and you did that. Well, with this path that I've been on over the last 10 years with Rodeo time, it's shown me it's so incredibly easy for, like, to the atheist, to anybody. Like, I could name off like these 97 different things that came together that were just impeccable timing. For instance, like, had this happened just a few years earlier with the way the internet was going, social media and all those things, like, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Or, you know, had my dad not been the ag teacher, my involvement with FFA or rodeo or me being a class clown, like, I was probably just the least likely voted to succeed, you know, like, I was a joke. Literally, I was a joke, and people didn't take me serious growing up. And those are the things that God used in my life. And so that's been fun, is to get to see, and maybe that's just maturity. And as I've gotten older, I was going to realize that anyway. But specifically with the path I've been on, it's like, man, God had a plan, and it's still unfolding.
How do you answer this? So I'll play devil's advocate, assuming I'm like an atheist or something, or somebody who you know, doesn't come from a Christian perspective. Are you saying that if you become a Christian and you follow God, like, good things will happen to you financially and you'll be successful? Okay, so like, how do you combat that? Because that's what I've always struggled with, is the idea of when seemingly good things happen to me, like, I want to give thanks and glory to God for it, but I also don't want to make it confusing to people who maybe don't believe. Because there is obviously something going around in popular Christianity that I personally despise, and it's that kind of prosperity gospel type stuff.
For sure.
If you are a Christian, you'll have health, wealth, prosperity, all these good things will happen to you.
Not the case.
I mean, if you read the Bible, it's quite to the contrary.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
all the disciples
died a martyr. Exactly. It's in, you know, pick up your cross and follow me, crucify yourself daily, those types of things. But in popular Christianity, it's a lot about the things that you can achieve of this world, right? And like what you can get. And it starts to turn a little bit into like God's a genie in a bottle. And so I resist that a lot. So I struggle a lot with like being thankful, you know, in front of people and giving glory to God, but I also don't want to make it confusing.
So I just briefly mentioned it earlier. I don't know, it didn't fit in the conversation, but you might have noticed when I said, like, my dad died with $800 in his account, and we split that 4 ways, you know.
Sure.
It's just, do the math, day work pays better than that. But if I had to choose the men I wanted to be in my life 1,000 times out of 1,000, I would choose my dad. And I know some other men that have a lot of money. I just don't think that you can view success through the lens of money. And, my neighbor and I, we talk about, God's plan, and he was talking to me about, and he's a successful businessman. And he said, I was praying about this one particular decision, and I really felt that God impressed on my heart that it would be a success. And so I decided to do it. And then a couple of days later, I realized, like, I hope or who knows, but God's version of success in that particular story may not be what my original thought was. So for instance, like, there's that parable about the guy who has the horse that runs off, and like, oh no, it's like, well, I don't know, good or bad. J.R. Verzane said it, on my podcast, like, but essentially what it means for me tell the little parable.
I don't know it. Oh, you don't? Is that the one where he finds a horse,
like, good or bad,
breaks his leg?
Yeah. And then his son breaks his leg, and it's like, well, that sucks. Well, good or bad, we don't know. Well, then there's a draft, and he doesn't have to go to war. And it's like, well, that's good. Well, we don't know. I don't know. You know what
Totally.
I mean? Like, but regardless, as my neighbor said it, I don't know what success in God's eyes in this particular situation looks like. And so that's something that's always in the back of my mind. I think something that has impacted me, a quote that's impacted me lately, changed my life, it's a book by Andrew Murray. It's just called Humility. I've been studying this for about 1.5 years, and it came out in that sermon that I posted online that you were and I were talking.
Yeah, I recommend everybody listen to that. What church was it at?
It was in Throckmorton.
Okay.
Donnell Brown and them started kind of a church in an old church and asked me to speak. But the quote, Andrew Murray quote, I'll kind of paraphrase it, but the quote was, accept with gratitude anything that reminds you of your need for humility or brings you to it. So a lot of people might say that, for instance, we've all heard the Michael Jordan story about him not making his varsity basketball team in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went on to become Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
And so they might agree with Andrew Murray and like, yeah, you need to be thankful for your failures because they'll fuel you to be successful. And yeah, they might do that. But what Andrew Murray is saying is to be grateful for the things that humble you, like a failure, because that's where we're called to stay in front of God. So it's not so that we can rise up and beat all our adversaries and enemies and all that. It's so that we can, the lower the man is, the easier I'm blanking on the deal. Hey, can you turn that down just a little bit, Donnie? Thanks. The lower a man is, the faster and speedier the Spirit of God can fill him. And I think that all the world's problems stem from pride. I think all the world's answers stem from humility.
My problems stem from pride.
I think all of ours do. Mine do.
Yeah, really every sin, or what you call a sin, can be traced back to pride.
Pride is what made the devil the devil. He got too proud of his beauty and who he was, and he tried to elevate himself to the level of God. Now, he brought a third of the angels with him. And then humility is what made Jesus Jesus. Like, he humbled himself to the point of death on a cross. And so I think that pride can keep you out of heaven, because so long as you're looking down on people, you never look up.
Yeah, the really striking thing, and it's something that I've struggled with, and I heard you talk about it in the sermon, was the idea of being humble, though, can oftentimes be prideful. If you are doing it for attention, or being humble for the sake of people knowing you're humble, is inherently prideful. And I find that fascinating. When I got saved, that was one of my big kind of skewers in my heart was humility, because it wasn't even necessarily that I was like an overly humble person. It was just exposing just how sinful we really are.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like you can be trying to do the right thing, you can be trying to be humble, but you could be prideful in doing so. And it's like it exposes total depravity.
Your pride can cause you to do a lot of things. For instance, like abstain from alcohol, abstain from sexual immorality, like anger. Your pride can make you brave. Like you can put a list of things on there. And what C.S. Lewis says is the devil is perfectly contented to see your chilblains cured in exchange for giving you cancer. So a chilblain is like a sore, like a cold sore, or just like a bump on your arm. Like he's perfectly content to see like all those things cured, a scratch, if he can in turn give you cancer. And that's what pride is. It's spiritual cancer. These other sins are like C.S. Lewis calls flea bites, like sexual immorality, drunkenness. Those are flea bites compared to pride. And what that reminds me of is like, dadgum, like that's why, and he says there'll be people that get to heaven. They're like, did we not cast out demons in your name? And he says, depart from me, I never knew you. And I think rewind that, their original intention was a prideful one, and it was about them, and it wasn't about, advancing the kingdom.
Yeah, so did you come from, like, how were you raised? Were you like a pretty legalistic type Baptist, Church of Christ?
No. My dad definitely wasn't like, my dad was a man of faith. He definitely had some of that cowboy pride in him, looking back. But like I believe that he was ultimately very humble, looking at just the points in our life, and he, humility is one thing. Like I remember the two things I've always said I remember most about my dad was his faith and his loyalty.
Okay.
But and he definitely was proud at times, but
because you kind of alluded to in your sermon, you kind of alluded to the idea of some of your struggles has been there's things that are right ways of living that you really emphasize. No cursing, don't drink, like those types of things. But you also identified those as sources of pride in your life too.
So I think that I just didn't realize the role pride was playing. Like I remember deciding to follow Jesus. I remember like thinking like, this is the path I'd like to get on. And I start going down that path and I see these rules, and like I've never drank alcohol ever. And at first my dad did it. So it was just kind of like, okay, well, I guess I won't do that. And then I turned 21. I definitely wasn't going to do it before I turned 21, and then I turned 21. I was like, I don't want to drink. And I think it was, now looking back, like it was hard for me not to be prideful about that at times, especially in a setting where it was so rare.
Mm-hmm.
College, rodeo, like everybody did. And I didn't. It was just something everybody knew about me. And in a lot of ways, it was maybe something people, even more so, like I had friends that were proud of it for me.
Okay.
But like I can look back to that, and I don't want to be too hard on a younger me. Like I think I did that for good reasons, but there were definitely times when I was proud of it.
Sure.
100%.
Sure. I guess on the flip side, it'd be better. It's better than being proud of doing it. I mean, because a lot of people are super proud of the horrific lifestyle that they live.
Yeah. I just think that, right. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. It would be better than being proud of something sinful, for sure. But anytime pride gets involved, it terrifies me now, knowing that like pride is spiritual. So like drinking, sex, gluttony with food, like those are all sins of the flesh.
Okay.
Pride is spiritual.
Yeah. I've never actually had anybody, that sounds very, very simplistic, and it makes a lot of sense, but I guess I've never actually analyzed it that way, that there are more spiritual sins than there are physical.
Yeah. Like
sins of,
but
well, yeah, I guess the Catholic Church always taught that, right? Wasn't there sins of admission and sins of
I don't know what they
omission
do.
or something like that?
I don't know what they teach.
I'm not Catholic, but
Neither am I.
we picked up some Catholic stuff. Trinity.
Yeah.
Trinity's Catholic. That's always been a confusing one to me. There's certain things that I can't really explain perfectly.
Yeah.
But I believe them to be true.
Yeah.
I can't 100%. People talk about like, how can you prove that there's a God? I'm like, well, I can't.
Yeah.
I think I can get pretty close. Like, I think I could the odds are probably in our favor that there is a creator God.
That's what the book Mere Christianity does for, that's where my journey on studying pride and humility started, was that book. There's a chapter in there called The Great Sin. And that's where it talks about pride and humility. But leading up to that chapter, it talks a lot about, it's essentially a book for the unconvinced. And so it approaches Christianity as a former atheist, which is C.S. Lewis is a former atheist. And how he arrived at Christianity to be true without using scripture. Meaning, like, if you don't believe the Bible to be true, why would you even look that direction?
Yeah.
That's what the whole book is. Yeah. There's a few of them like that. Another one I just started, which I've always intended on reading, is The Case for Christ.
That's the
and he's a former
Strobel guy.
Yeah, Strobel. Yeah,
they did a movie too.
Yeah, they may have.
It's a pretty good little movie. Was he the one that was like a journalist or an author?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
That's a good one. He was an angry atheist.
Yes.
Super angry.
Yeah, and then his wife got saved.
Yep.
And he started approaching it as if he were writing a piece on a criminal case or something.
There's a guy named J. Warner Wallace too, who was a cold case detective, and he wrote a book called Cold Case Christianity. You'd probably dig, because he took it from the perspective of being a detective on cold cases, and how they would present that to a judge, and you have to have like a lot more evidence. And so he actually just applied that to historical Christianity, the Bible, and took like a lot of secular viewpoints to try to prove it. And it was pretty fascinating from like a court of law.
Yeah.
Like, is this true, or how true could it be? Because most cases are solved by like not that much evidence, right? And they like convict people to prison. That's a good one too, Warner Wallace.
Yeah.
But that's the way I kind of entered into it. I mean, I was raised in a Christian home, but I definitely took a bit of a more atheistic approach at some point in my life, because I just wanted to be able to live the way I wanted to. I didn't want any accountability. So I kind of went through a lot of that stuff before.
It's definitely more fun at times to pretend like it's not true.
Absolutely. It's a lot easier. And there's no conviction. There's just, you just do what you want. It feels right, but you're blinded.
There were times, and that's what, like C.S. Lewis said, when I was an atheist, there were more times than not when Christianity seemed extremely plausible. But as a Christian, it's the opposite. There's just no, but he's got no room in his brain to think that it's not possible. But as an atheist, he always thought it was possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just trippy to think about.
No doubt, man.
But anyway.
Yeah, I love it. I'm glad that you're so open about it. That's rare too.
Yeah,
I was even, when Jordan was on my podcast, we talked about it a little bit. That's when she told me that you guys do some of those groups on YouTube.
Yeah, so we do a Bible study as a group at the house, typically once a week when we're not all scattered out over the country. Once a week, we'll do a Bible study together. And right now we're going through the book of Acts. But on my YouTube channel, I'll do typically twice a month, every other week, 8-10 minute Bible study that is essentially what I'm studying at the time. So for the last year and a half, it's been a lot on pride and humility. But and I'll put those out. It's just me talking to the camera about what I've been studying. And I put those out as unlisted. And that's always, I'm not ashamed of my faith, but I'm also not necessarily a preacher.
Yeah.
And so through rodeotime.com, my website, and the marketing efforts that we've made over the years, I've got this phone number that I text people on. And it is me texting, but, it's in the tens of thousands. And so I'll respond to people, but also I use it for marketing. So like, hey guys, use free ship code birthday, or something like that. So I've used that phone number for the Bible study. If you'll text me the word Bible, you might get some marketing text occasionally, but because it's a very expensive phone line.
Sure.
And that was its original intention, was marketing. But you'll also get these Bible studies twice a month. And so I just liked that extra step people had to go to obtain the Bible study.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, I just don't think I'm qualified. But if you really want to hear what I have to say, you can go to this place. And so that's something that I've done for, I guess, a year or so now.
I can respect that. I think a lot of people who maybe are unbelievers can respect that more, even because it starts to get.
And then the sermon, of course, I thought, well, this was at a public church where anybody could have shown up. I'll just put this one on public. And so I did that one on public. And anyways, it was crazy, like how many people in the comments ripped me apart or tried to, because I was wearing a cowboy hat.
Oh, in church?
Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
Which it never really crossed my mind.
Yeah, I mean,
I've been to so many cowboy churches, but
yeah, no kidding.
I don't know. I can see why someone would have a preference, but there were people that like, I've lost all respect for you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like unfollow, never.
Oh, talk about the pride thing.
No kidding.
It's like not even listening to what you say.
So there were a lot of people commenting on those comments, like, dang, y'all missed the whole sermon, didn't you?
Good grief. But you should direct them to what Jesus had to say about the Pharisees and Sadducees.
It reminded me of, why I like that it's on unlisted. But it's not that I'm just completely opposed to people that want to criticize me. It just, I'm a YouTuber that occasionally does a Bible study. And that's why I don't feel bad about the marketing on there, on my text messages. I'm not a preacher that has a YouTube and an apparel line. Yeah. And I'm not saying they shouldn't. Maybe that's okay. I probably, if I were a full-time preacher, I probably wouldn't do that personally. But anyway, that's why it's kind of affected. Am I turned good for the camera?
Oh, you look.
I want them to be able to see me.
Well, you got that giant monitor right there that you can see yourself on.
There you go. But
I've gotten shredded for wearing the hat at a table, and it was like a 5-second video.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely times like that. Yeah, I mean, I get it. I understand the conversation, but I'm also like, I don't know. It's not worth,
because it's
not worth a fist fight.
I was, yeah, but they also wouldn't be coming at you that strong if they were right there in front of you either. So
99% of them wouldn't. You're right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but if people would just actually listen to what you were saying, that would have been probably more beneficial than worrying about your hat.
Yeah,
that's a bit peculiar. But
it was just a curveball from it. But anyway, like I said, it was just a random message that I just, because it was in a public place, I decided to share it as a public post.
I think it's cool that you don't push it out there too much. In my world, you've probably even been to concerts where a lot of guys are out there in front of, thousands of people, and they're, they end up kind of doing a proselytizing thing, like in the middle of their show. I want to thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and doing that whole thing, which is cool. If their heart's in the right spot, that's really cool. But sometimes I think it rubs people the wrong way, and it's can be a bit flippant at times, because okay, the implication, what you're talking about is you want to thank your Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Like, for what? He is God, and then he became man and then died for the sins of the world. And so that's what you're right now thanking him for. And sometimes it's a bit flippant, and I don't know if we're really like understanding the magnitude of it. And it even kind of, I'm a believer, and it kind of rubs me the wrong way sometimes. And so it's even something that I'm not totally opposed to doing it, but I'm maybe a little bit more guarded. And if somebody wants to be in private and like have that conversation, we're going to like get into the pretty fine details of it. But so I can respect that you don't maybe just throw it around a whole bunch.
So
Somebody wants to get to
I definitely don't mind if somebody wants to. You know, I I've not necessarily been to a lot of concerts where I felt like somebody was, I think there's some more of those online prosperity gospel type situations where I feel like, man, you guys are towing the line. Like, why are you really doing this?
Sure.
But at the end of the day, it's definitely not up to us to judge where their hearts are at. Maybe their hearts are in the right spot.
I know. I'm a little bit envious if their hearts are in the right place.
For me personally, I guess I've tried to. Early on, I was talking to my accountability partner, Jamin, like I felt compelled, like once I realized that like people were watching my stuff, I felt compelled to almost go into preacher mode on certain posts. And he said, man, I can't remember how he worded it. I decided to like respect where God put me. And that was a comedian on YouTube in the rodeo and Western industry.
Yeah.
And another thing that I learned is like anybody can say things. Like anybody can write a good script and like make a good godly post online. And that didn't prove anything. And he said where you'll have your biggest impact is probably the one-on-one stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So like with the interns or a conversation in a booth with a fan, an avid, fan that comes back all the time, like with sponsor relationships. And so that's where the one-on-one will probably, the biggest impact I could have on the kingdom would probably happen there. Because I feel like I could just load y'all full of bull crap on who I want you to think that I am, and so that's what makes me a little more hesitant. If anything, to be honest, the one thing that I'm like, that's on the tip of my tongue the most every day to be like, to shout for would be like my pro-life views.
Oh, right on, dude.
But like, which I want, again, going back to, I want to respect where God put me. A lot of people use my stuff for an escape.
Okay.
And there's so many voices out there right now. That would be one that I feel like is more, even more important than like 2A stuff, That to me is like no big deal, like, compared to some of the other issues. But regardless, that's how I view it. I do feel like there may be one day that I'm put on a stage and ask questions where it gets me canceled. And if I'm able to communicate what God has on my heart, then so be it.
Yeah.
I'd hate to get canceled for doing something silly, but if it were to get canceled, I mean, it would suck no matter what, but there would come a peace with time of like, okay, you got canceled for being who God called you to be.
Yeah.
And so there's some peace behind that for sure, but I don't know. I don't have a grand plan right now. Like I'm just trying to make wise decisions. And going back to the money thing, I think I feel blessed that my sister has a lady that works for her who's from the Philippines, and she sends all of her money back to the Philippines, to her family, for school, for food, for everything. And she was just the one chosen to come over here to do that. And I feel blessed that number one, I get to live in this country, and number two, that God chose me to be a voice for him, not only in rodeo, but like with the kind of people I get to do that with every day. Like I'm so blessed, and it's a wonderful season. And I don't know what the next season looks like. Maybe it's 15 more years, 20 more years of doing this. And if so, so be it. I am in love with my schedule every day. And so if I get to keep doing that for 20 more years, great. But if God has a different plan, I just hope that I'm ready to do what he wants me to.
That's beautiful. That's really great. I struggle a little bit with some thankfulness stuff, because for me, thankfulness is a lot of just like perspective. Just like you said, just even being born in this country, and there's so much stuff to be thankful for. And there's usually always somebody that has it worse than you when you start feeling bad for yourself.
But again, like whatever, going back to that quote, I had the morning I read that quote, accept with gratitude anything that reminds you of your need for humbling or brings you to it. The morning I read that was like, maybe is when I got news of like the biggest hit, the dumbest business decision I'd ever made. It was like the most trying 2 or 3 days.
Okay.
And so, like, borderline just crippling business decision I made.
Oh, Lord.
And it was an accident, but like, it was nobody's fault, and it ended up being a good thing. But the point is like, if you've got the right attitude about, I think you cannot have any more faith than you have humility. And so if faith in Christ is what's most important, that means the more humility we have, the closer we can grow to him. And so if there's these things coming in our lives that are going to humble us, we should be grateful.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm going to be.
Sure.
I'm a work in progress, but I'm just saying that is something on the horizon that I think all Christians should be looking at.
It's a little bit of be careful what you pray for. You know, if you're praying for the attributes of God, like patience and humility.
Humility is number one.
Yeah, I mean, really any of it, joy. I mean, like, if you're praying for patience, he's probably going to give you things that are going to make you become patient.
Mm-hmm.
And those probably aren't going to be super fun.
Right.
If you're praying for more humility, he's probably going to give you things that are going to make you humble.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I was like, hold on, God, I'll get there.
Yeah,
let me get there.
Not right now, bro.
I'll get there. Well, let me. My prayer is that it just doesn't take certain catastrophic events to make me humble.
Yeah,
like, Lord willing, me and him can get there before it takes that.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. There's a I won't even get into details of who it is, but there's a guy that I'm relatively close with and struggling with some, addiction type stuff. And he's been going through it for like some years now, and he's been pulled over like numerous times with stuff on him in his truck and whatnot, and he's always been let off, right? And he says, he's a Christian, and but he's always struggled with it and always goes back to it. And so I kind of poke at him a little, because the way I became a Christian was we were going through Romans 9, and a guy finally said, you keep struggling with these same types of things. You ever thought you're not saved? And that was like, I had never had anybody really poke me like that before. So we've discussed that type of stuff. And, and he always says, he's like, man, by the grace of God, I didn't go to jail those times I got pulled over and all that. And I go, you sure it was by the grace of God? You didn't go to jail? Well, what do you mean? It's like, well, you're still doing it, aren't you? And it's like, yeah. It's like, well, do you think if it was from God, he would have, if you went to jail for those things, you probably wouldn't be doing it anymore.
Yeah.
Like, are you sure that was God that let you off and it wasn't somebody else? And that kind of like reframed his mind.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, dang.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because, by our own human standards, we judge things good, bad.
Right.
I didn't go to jail. That's good for me.
Mm-hmm.
You sure? Because you're still doing the same stuff.
Yeah.
And that's been pretty humbling for me too. Because, gosh, we like fall into that type of stuff so often.
Yeah.
What's good? What's bad? What's good for me? It's like, well, you don't even know what's good for you.
Right.
I definitely don't know what's good for me. So it's just like weird. It's like the longer I've been a Christian, my prayers have just become even more opaque in some way. They've gotten more specific in some ways, and then more opaque in other ways, where I'm just like, dude, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what humbleness is. I have no clue.
Yeah. No kidding.
I don't know. But I'm glad you're so open to talk about it, man. I'm actually glad that we got to have like a relatively deep conversation.
Yeah.
I know that's probably not like I like how your whole thing is based on humor and fun. And
yeah. It's you get to start asking certain questions in podcasts, and it can get pretty intense pretty quick. Yeah. But that's kind of how a lot of our podcasts end up,
Oh, really?
Yeah. Just depending on the guest. There's some like Cody Johnson and Cody Johnson was my last podcast, and we never got serious the whole time.
Sure.
But he and I had such a history of, and it was just, we laughed the entire time.
Yeah, but you guys have probably gotten to know each other on a deeper level at different times.
Correct. Yeah. And so there were certain questions that we didn't have time to get to.
Sure.
We were just telling old stories.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just depends on the day and the questions. But
sure. Well, I can probably joke around with you more now.
Oh, you're good.
Now that I know more about you.
Like I said, sometimes I get in this warehouse and I get in business mode. Yeah. That'll get in sales mode.
That's what fascinates me. I don't know how you separate I don't know. That seems really difficult. I have a hard time with it, with just getting up on stage and doing that thing, but then you're also worried about like ticket sales, and then like this happened over here and you got merch and blah, blah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm still learning because, like I said, like that mistake I made the other day. They still happen. They're heavy.
Oh, that was recent.
Yeah, yeah. The last 6 weeks,
Yeah, but
2 months. Yeah, yeah. It's definitely not the type of economy we need to be making those type of mistakes in. But
yeah. Well, what was the quote again? Humility.
accept with gratitude anything that reminds you of your need for humility or brings you to it.
Beautiful. All right. Well, I think that's where we end it.
Cool.
Thanks, bro.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Heck
It was
yeah.
a pleasure.
See y'all.
Dale Brisby.